Ethan walked through the crowded space station corridor, his head held high but his heart pounding. The station was alive with activity. Aliens of all shapes and sizes hurried past humans, merchants shouted over the hum of machinery, and the air smelled of metal, spices, and fuel. He had always loved visiting this place, but today it felt different. Today he knew trouble was coming. It had started as a small mistake, a simple miscalculation in a trade deal. Ethan had promised a rare energy crystal to a wealthy alien merchant, but accidentally gave it to a rival. The council had summoned him immediately. He had thought it would be a warning, a small fine, maybe a public apology. He had not imagined this. "You are reckless," the council leader, a tall, thin alien with skin like polished copper, said. His voice echoed across the council chamber. "You have embarrassed the station and our trade partners. You must be punished." Ethan swallowed hard. "I understand," he said, trying to sound calm. Inside, fear and anger battled. "Please, council. I can make it right. I'll work harder. No," the council leader interrupted, his many eyes narrowing. "Your words are empty. Your punishment will teach you humility." Then the verdict fell like a hammer. Ethan would be married. Not to a wealthy partner, not to someone of his own species, but to a low-class alien servant, sold for $5 in the station's black market auction. The chamber erupted in whispers. Some aliens laughed. Humans looked shocked. Ethan froze. $5. That was not just a marriage, it was humiliation, a lifetime of shame in front of the galaxy. When he was led to the holding area, he saw her for the first time. She was small and wiry, with greenish skin and large round eyes that blinked at him curiously. Her body smelled faintly of the filth of the lower decks, and she wore tattered clothes that barely covered her. Yet there was something sharp in her gaze, a spark that made Ethan uneasy. "This is Lyra," the officer said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "You are married now. Treat her well or don't. Your choice." Ethan stared at her. I can't marry her," he said, disbelief thick in his voice. She's a servant, sold for $5. Lyra tilted her head and blinked. "I am what I am," she said simply. Her voice was rough but clear. "If you want to be miserable, that is your problem." Ethan felt his face flush. She had courage, she had nerve, and somehow that annoyed him more than anything. The next hours were awkward. They were herded to a small living quarters in the station's lower deck. It was tiny, barely large enough for one, let alone two. The smell, the cramped space, and the noise of machinery everywhere made Ethan feel sick. He wanted to leave, to scream, to make the council change its mind. But there was no way out. "You sleep there," he said, pointing to a corner bed. "I'll take this one." Lyra made no move to argue. She simply sat cross-legged and began cleaning a small metal plate, her movements precise and calm. Ethan watched her, unsure why he felt irritation mixed with curiosity. Days passed. At first, they barely spoke. Ethan was angry, embarrassed, and frustrated by her strange habits. Lyra, in turn, seemed amused by his discomfort but never mocked him outright. She adapted quickly to the space station, fixing broken pipes, cleaning machinery, and navigating the lower decks better than any human. Ethan could not understand how someone sold for $5 could be so skilled. One evening, the council called Ethan to discuss his behavior. He had spent the day avoiding Lyra, refusing to work alongside her. "You are failing to learn humility," the council leader said. "You treat this marriage as a joke. It is not. You must cooperate, learn, or your punishment continues indefinitely." Ethan clenched his fists. He hated this. He hated the council. He hated Lyra for making him feel powerless. He wanted to scream. But when he returned to their quarters, he found Lyra waiting with a small tray of food. "I know you don't like this," she said, offering it silently. "But you need strength. You can't survive if you are weak." Ethan stared at her. The words were simple, but her tone carried authority. Authority that he had never felt from any human. He took the food silently, feeling a strange sense of gratitude he did not want to admit. As days turned into weeks, Ethan began to notice more about Lyra. She was resourceful. When a fire broke out in the lower decks, she guided him to safety. Her knowledge of the station's hidden passages saving their lives. She could repair machinery he had struggled with for months. She knew herbs and alien remedies that could cure minor injuries instantly. And yet she never sought praise. She never complained. She worked quietly, efficiently, surviving in a world that had discarded her. One night, Ethan could not sleep. He watched her sitting by the small window of their quarters, staring at the stars. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. Lyra looked at him, her large eyes reflecting the distant lights. "Do what?" "Live here. Alone. Like this. Everyone treats you like nothing." She shrugged. "I survive. That is all. Complaining is for those who fear life. I do not fear it." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. He realized then that he had been judging her by the wrong standards. She was not a servant in the sense he had imagined. She was capable, strong, and intelligent. Somehow, the very thing that should have humiliated him now made him feel small. But he could not admit it, not yet. Instead, he looked away, pretending to inspect the machinery by the window. The turning point came when a shipment of illegal goods arrived at the station. The traders, suspicious of Ethan and Lyra's unusual partnership, tried to seize the cargo and frame Ethan. A fight broke out in the crowded corridors. Ethan, armed with only a basic plasma tool, tried to defend himself. Lyra, small but quick, moved like a shadow, disabling attackers, guiding Ethan through hidden passages, and turning the tide of the conflict. By the time the security droids arrived, the situation was under control. Traders were detained, and the council took notice. "You work together," the council leader said. "Perhaps this punishment has value after all." Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and embarrassment. Lyra, however, only smiled faintly. "See," she said, "we are stronger than they think. If you stop fighting me, you might survive." Ethan did not respond. He was still too angry, too stubborn. But a seed of respect had been planted. Days turned into weeks. The more time he spent with her, the more he saw her value. She was clever, resourceful, and brave. He began to rely on her advice and skills, even if he refused to admit it aloud. Slowly, he started learning the first lesson of his punishment: humility. One evening, while they were repairing a broken communication array, Ethan finally said something he had never imagined he would. You were sold for $5? That seems impossible." Lyra looked at him, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "People value the wrong things," she said. "Strength, skill, intelligence, these do not sell. Only appearances do." Ethan nodded slowly. He did not yet know what this meant for their future, but he felt a strange sense of curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, this punishment was not only about humiliation. Maybe it was about teaching him something he could not have learned any other way. For the first time in weeks, Ethan went to sleep without anger, without fear. He still did not like his situation. He still did not want to admit anything. But he knew one thing. Life with Lyra was going to be different. And deep down, he could not deny it. He was intrigued. The stars outside their small window twinkled in silent judgment. Somewhere out there, countless alien eyes watched the station. But for Ethan, the most important one was Lyra's. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of alarms. Red lights blinked across the lower deck of the station, and the hum of machinery had become a harsh, urgent roar. He jumped from his bed, heart racing, and immediately spotted Lyra already, moving through the narrow corridor with remarkable speed. "Ethan," she shouted over the noise, "we have to go now!" "What? What's happening?" he yelled back, fumbling with his plasma tool. "No time!" Lyra grabbed his arm and pulled him along. Her strength was surprising for her size, and Ethan stumbled to keep up. They burst into the open dock where a transport ship had been sabotaged. Flames licked its sides and sparks flew like falling stars. A group of pirates, large, heavily armed aliens, had somehow infiltrated the station. They were taking hostages and looting cargo. Ethan froze for a moment, panic coursing through his veins. This was worse than anything he had imagined. "Ethan, move," Lyra hissed, pulling him behind a stack of metal crates. She had already scanned the scene, her green eyes sharp and calculating. Ethan could hardly believe it. She was small, but she moved with the confidence of someone who had faced worse. The pirates were yelling in alien languages, some firing plasma rifles that hummed and popped dangerously close. Ethan tried to lift his tool, but his hands shook. Lyra reached over and steadied it. "Aim here," she said, pointing to a control panel that could shut the transport's energy supply down. "I'll cover you." Ethan nodded. His heart pounded, but he followed her instructions. With her guidance, he managed to disable the transport's energy core. Sparks flew, alarms screamed, and the pirates cursed. Some ran, others fired blindly into the corridor. Lyra moved like lightning, knocking 2 of them off their feet and disarming a third with a sharp twist of her hands. Ethan could hardly keep up. But something inside him had changed. He realized in that terrifying moment that Lyra's skills and quick thinking were keeping them alive. He could no longer see her as just a low-class servant. She was clever, fearless, and capable of saving lives, his life included. After several tense minutes, security droids finally arrived. They fired stun nets and rounded up the pirates, leaving Ethan and Lyra panting and exhausted in the chaos. "Why didn't you tell me you were this good?" Ethan asked, finally finding his voice. Lyra shrugged, brushing soot from her clothes. "I never needed to. Survival is simple. Know what to do it, and live. People only notice when they are afraid." Ethan nodded, too stunned to speak further. He realized then that he had underestimated her completely. This was not a punishment. Anymore, she was his partner, whether he liked it or not. The council took notice of the incident, and for the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of respect for their decision. They did not just punish him, they forced him to confront reality. He could not survive alone in this world. Lyra had skills he lacked, instincts he did not understand, and courage he could only admire. A week later, the station received a distress call from a distant, uninhabited planet. A mining colony had gone silent, and the council feared it had been attacked. Ethan was assigned to investigate. To his surprise, and slight terror, he was required to travel with Lyra. The transport ride was tense. Ethan avoided speaking, his pride making it difficult to accept her presence. Lyra, on the other hand, seemed calm, almost amused by his discomfort. "You know," she said casually, "you can stop glaring at me. I won't bite." "I'm not glaring," Ethan muttered, looking out the viewport at the stars. "I'm focused." Lyra smirked. "Focused, right?" When they landed, the scene was worse than anyone expected. The colony was deserted. Mining equipment lay twisted and broken. Smoke curled from several buildings, and the air had a strange, acrid smell. It was clear that something violent had happened. "Stay close," Lyra whispered, scanning the area with her sharp eyes. "We don't know what's still out there." Ethan nodded, gripping his plasma tool tightly. He had no idea what dangers awaited them, but he trusted Lyra's instincts. As they explored, it became obvious that the miners had been attacked by a strange alien predator native to the planet. Its footprints were enormous, its claws sharp, and the occasional trail of blood told a gruesome story. Ethan shivered. He had faced pirates, but this was different. "Ethan," Lyra said softly, "we need a plan. This is not like the station. Here we survive by thinking, not by luck." They worked together to set traps and secure shelter. Ethan quickly realized how invaluable Lyra's knowledge was. She taught him how to camouflage their temporary camp, detect predator tracks, and even make basic defensive tools from mining equipment. "You see?" she said with a small grin. $5 well spent. Ethan could not help but laugh quietly, despite the tension. He still felt awkward around her, but a strange feeling of admiration was growing. Lyra had been sold cheaply, yes, but her value was beyond anything money could measure. The first night was long. Strange noises echoed in the darkness, growls, rustling, and the occasional scream of a distant creature. Ethan stayed close to Lyra, his fear mixing with a newfound respect. He realized that without her, he would have been helpless. "Thanks. You," he said quietly, almost to himself. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For keeping me alive," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet. We have a long way to go." Over the next several days, they worked as a team. Ethan learned to listen, to trust, and to follow her instructions. Lyra learned to rely on him for tasks that required human strength, patience, or reasoning. They faced constant danger, alien predators, unstable terrain, and environmental hazards, but each challenge drew them closer. During a particularly tense encounter, a predator emerged from the shadows, its massive form blocking their path. Ethan froze, heart hammering. Lyra acted without hesitation. She grabbed a makeshift spear, lured the creature into a trap, and immobilized it long enough for them to escape. Ethan stared at her, awe and disbelief written on his face. "How do you do that?" he asked breathlessly. "I survive," she said simply, "and I adapt. You'll learn." By the time they returned to the station, Ethan was no longer the same man who had stomped through the corridors complaining about his punishment. He had changed. He had faced danger, relied on Lyra, and seen her brilliance firsthand. For the first time, he felt that their pairing, forced by punishment, was not so terrible after all. He also noticed other subtle things. Lyra's sense of humor, her sharp wit, and the way she looked at the stars as if she understood secrets no one else could. Slowly, he found himself smiling at her jokes, sharing small stories, and even laughing at her sarcastic comments. One evening, while cleaning the transport ship after their mission, Ethan looked at Lyra and said quietly, "You know, maybe this punishment wasn't so bad after all." Lyra paused, looking at him with her large, intelligent eyes. "I told you," she said. "Life is what you make it. Complaining doesn't change anything. Survival does." Ethan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I think I might be starting to understand that." For the first time since the council had imposed the punishment, Ethan felt a sense of hope. Not only had he survived, but he had done so with someone who was clever, brave, and loyal by his side. He realized that Lyra was more than a servant or a punishment. She was a partner, a teacher, and perhaps even a friend. As they prepared to leave the planet, Ethan looked at her and thought something he had never imagined. Maybe, just maybe, he could be happy in this strange, unexpected marriage. He did not know what the future held, but he knew one thing with certainty. He could not face it without Lyra. And for the first time, that thought did not scare him. It made him feel alive. The stars stretched endlessly before them as the transport ship lifted off the planet, carrying two survivors who had faced the wild together. Ethan glanced at Lyra once more. She was already scanning the skies, planning, calculating, surviving. And Ethan knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with her, and perhaps in ways he could not yet imagine, even enjoy them. The punishment had begun as humiliation. But now, as the stars streaked past the viewport, Ethan felt the first stirrings of something far stronger: respect, admiration, and a strange, exciting sense of partnership. The struggle was not over. The galaxy was full of danger. But Ethan had discovered something the Council had not anticipated. When a human and an alien servant worked together, nothing could stop them. Weeks had passed since Ethan and Lyra returned from the dangerous planet. The space station was bustling as usual, but something had shifted between them. Ethan no longer saw Lyra as just a lowly servant. Her courage, intelligence, and skill had left a deep impression. Yet pride and habit kept him from admitting it openly. Lyra, on the other hand, seemed to understand him better than he understood himself. She watched him navigate the crowded corridors, deal with arrogant traitors, and argue with the Council. Her eyes followed him quietly, noticing small changes: how he hesitated before judging others, how he considered options he would have ignored before, and how he now deferred to her advice when navigating unfamiliar situations. One morning, a distress call came from a research station orbiting a nearby asteroid field. Strange readings had been detected: energy fluctuations, missing personnel, and sudden equipment failures. The council ordered Ethan and Lyra to investigate immediately. As they prepared the transport ship, Ethan glanced at Lyra. "You really think we can handle this?" he asked. Lyra smirked. "Handle it? We survive it. You're still thinking like a human tourist. Danger is not about fear. It's about knowing what to do when fear comes." Ethan shook his head, but he felt a small smile tug at the corner of his lips. Her confidence was infectious. The journey to the asteroid field was tense but uneventful. When they arrived, the research station appeared deserted. Broken machinery floated in zero gravity, and the main control hub was dark. Something had gone terribly wrong. "Stay close," Lyra whispered, her sharp green eyes scanning the station. "We don't know what caused this. Could be hostile aliens, rogue AI, or worse." Ethan nodded, gripping his tool. He followed her through the corridors, noticing her calm, deliberate movements. She checked every junction, every doorway, every corner, as though reading the station's secrets with her eyes. Then they found the first survivor. A young scientist, barely conscious, was trapped under a fallen support beam. Ethan rushed forward, but it was Lyra who quickly assessed the situation. "Move slowly," she instructed. "We need to lift together. Count to 3. They worked in tandem, lifting the beam and freeing the scientist. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude and awe. Her calm, strategic thinking saved lives. Again. Once the scientist was safe, Lyra turned to Ethan. "You see? Survival is about observation, patience, and timing, not panic." Ethan swallowed. He had always prided himself on quick thinking, but Lyra's approach was different: methodical, precise, and unfailingly effective. As they explored further, more signs of sabotage became clear. Machinery had been tampered with, power conduits were stripped, and notes written in alien symbols suggested deliberate interference. Ethan struggled to understand, but Lyra deciphered much of it. She had an uncanny ability to read alien languages and technical schematics, a skill that left Ethan both impressed and humbled. You know all of this?" he asked, astonished. Lyra shrugged. "People don't expect someone like me to be clever. I use that to my advantage." Ethan laughed softly. "I should have known. You've been surviving on scraps, on nothing, yet you've learned everything the council and traders don't know." Lyra's smile was faint but knowing. "Exactly. Survival teaches lessons no school ever could." As they worked together to restore the station's systems, a quiet bond formed. Ethan began sharing stories of his life on Earth, his childhood, and his dreams for the future. Lyra listened, sometimes interrupting with sharp, witty observations, but mostly she watched and learned. One evening, while recalibrating a sensor array, Ethan asked, "Why do you stay so calm all the time, even in danger?" Lyra looked at him, her large eyes reflecting the dim station lights. "Because fear is useless. It makes people freeze, make mistakes, die. Calm lets you think, act, survive. You're learning, slowly." Ethan chuckled nervously. "I guess I am. Slowly." She nudged him with her elbow. "Slowly is better than never." For the first time, Ethan felt that Lyra wasn't just his partner out of punishment. She was someone he could trust, someone whose skills complemented his own. He began relying on her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The real test came when the saboteurs returned. They were rogue AI drones, remnants of failed experiments from the research station. Their programming was aggressive, and they attacked without warning. Ethan froze as the first drone approached, its metallic limbs clicking menacingly. "Move!" Lyra shouted. She grabbed his arm and pulled him behind a bulkhead. "Aim for the joints, not the core. Short bursts, we can disable them." Ethan followed her instructions, firing carefully. Lyra moved with speed and precision, disabling 2 drones and creating openings for Ethan to act. He realized that, without her, he would have been trapped or destroyed. After a tense half-hour, the drones were neutralized. The station was safe, for now. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, looking at Lyra with newfound respect. "You saved me," he said quietly. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Again? And yet you still act like I'm your servant. You're slow to learn, Ethan." He laughed, shaking his head. "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't like admitting you're right." She smirked, clearly enjoying the small victory. Over the next few days, Ethan began to notice more subtle things about Lyra. The way she carefully observed alien creatures, the way she memorized maps of stations and planets, the quiet confidence in her movements. She had survived in harsh conditions, learned multiple languages, and navigated dangers he could barely imagine. And yet she never sought credit or reward. Ethan realized something else. He enjoyed her company. He liked talking to her, laughing with her, and even teasing her when she tried to teach him lessons. Slowly, walls he had built around his pride and ego began to crumble. One quiet evening, as they repaired a damaged communication array, Ethan spoke softly. "You know, I always thought this punishment was humiliating, but now, I'm not so sure. You've taught me more than anyone ever has." Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled faintly. "Good. That was the plan. Punishment isn't always about shame. Sometimes it's about learning." Ethan laughed softly. "I guess I'm a slow learner." "You're human," she said simply. "Slow, stubborn, but capable. I'll take it." For the first time, Ethan felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with fear or survival. He looked at Lyra, truly looked at her, not as a servant, not as a punishment, but as someone remarkable, clever, and strong. And he realized he wanted her to be part of his life, not because he had to, but because he chose to. Their bond grew stronger as they completed the mission. They rescued the remaining scientists, repaired critical systems, and sent reports back to the council. The station officials were impressed. Ethan, once humiliated, now stood beside Lyra, proud of their success. As they prepared to leave the asteroid field, Ethan turned to Lyra. I think we work well together," he said quietly. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You finally admit it?" Ethan nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, and I'm glad it's you by my side." Lyra's eyes softened. "I'm glad it's you too. You're learning fast for a human." They shared a brief moment of quiet understanding, the stars outside the viewport stretching endlessly before them. Ethan realized that their forced marriage, once a punishment, a humiliation, had grown into something else entirely, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared survival. And deep down, he could not deny a new feeling stirring in his chest, something beyond respect or friendship. It was curiosity, admiration, and maybe the very beginnings of affection. The galaxy was full of dangers and their journey was far from over. But Ethan knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges awaited, he and Lyra would face them together. And for the first time in his life, he was eager to see what came next. The stars shimmered outside their transport ship, silent witnesses to the bond that had formed between a human and a lowly alien servant. Neither knew what the future held, but both were ready to face it side by side. Ethan and Lyra had returned to the space station as heroes. The council praised their success and whispers of their bravery spread among humans and aliens alike. Yet not everyone was happy. Some traders and council members still saw Lyra as a low-class servant, an embarrassment to Ethan. They feared the unusual partnership could upset the established order. Ethan noticed the subtle glances and hushed comments as he walked through the corridors. It made him angry at first, but now, with Lyra by his side, he felt a quiet defiance. He would not let anyone belittle her or their partnership. "You hear that?" Lyra asked one evening, as they prepared for a council briefing. Ethan frowned. "Hear what?" "The whispers. People thinking we're an odd pair, that I don't belong beside you." Ethan shook his head, clenching his fists. They don't know anything about us. They're just afraid of change. Lyra smirked faintly. Good. Let them be afraid. That fear will make them cautious, and cautious is safe for now. Despite their private confidence, the council summoned them to a high-level meeting. The room was grand, filled with holographic displays and officials in elaborate uniforms. Ethan felt tension coil in his stomach as he and Lyra entered. You know, two again, the council leader said, his tone sharp. Your recent successes are noted, but your partnership causes concern. This arrangement was meant to be a lesson, not a spectacle. Ethan felt his face flush. We work well together, he said firmly. That's all. The council leader raised an eyebrow. Work well, or flaunt our rules? Lyra stepped forward. We are efficient, she said calmly. We survive, and we save lives. Isn't that what this station needs? Murmurs spread across the room. Some council members nodded, impressed by her confidence and logic. Others scowled, unwilling to accept the truth. The council deliberated, trying to find a way to separate them. They suggested sending Lyra to a remote labor post or reassigning Ethan to a dangerous mission alone, but Ethan refused. You will not separate us, he said, voice steady. We are stronger together. You may punish us if you like, but this partnership will not end. Lyra's eyes sparkled with approval. Finally, she whispered to him. You speak like you mean it. The council finally left them with a warning. If they failed any mission, the punishment would resume. Ethan and Lyra accepted, knowing they had no choice but to continue proving themselves. Soon after, a major crisis erupted. A cargo freighter carrying vital supplies to multiple colonies went missing. The council suspected piracy, but the situation was far worse. The freighter had been hijacked by a rogue warship, a heavily armed vessel with advanced technology. The warship was heading toward a neutral colony, threatening countless lives. Ethan and Lyra were tasked with intercepting the ship. The mission was dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous they had ever faced. Yet they both felt ready. They had survived pirates, predators, sabotage, and betrayal. This would be another test, one that could either cement their reputation or destroy them. The transport ship hummed as they approached the rogue warship. Ethan gripped the controls tightly, while Lyra scanned the vessel with advanced sensors. They're faster than we thought, she said, her tone calm but focused. We need a strategy, not brute force. Ethan nodded. I'm listening. Lyra laid out a plan. They would approach under stealth, disable the ship's shields with precision strikes, and board the vessel to take control. Ethan realized that her tactical mind was incredible. He had led missions before, but her strategy was meticulous, efficient, and creative. Let's do this, Ethan said, determination in his voice. The battle began. They navigated asteroid fields, dodged laser fire, and slipped past automated defenses. Ethan followed Lyra's instructions carefully, marveling at how she anticipated every movement of the rogue warship. He realized that their strength was not in weapons alone, but in teamwork. When they boarded the vessel, the corridors were dark and tense. Ethan felt fear creeping in, but Lyra's presence steadied him. Stay close, she whispered. We move together, one step, one action at a time. They encountered the rogue crew, aliens armed and ready, but Lyra's strategic thinking kept them alive. She coordinated Ethan's attacks, disarmed opponents, and found hidden control panels to shut down defenses. Ethan acted, but it was clear he was relying on her guidance. And he didn't mind. Together they reached the control room. The rogue captain, a large and menacing alien, stood before them. He sneered at Ethan. You, alone, and your little servant? Ethan stepped forward, standing beside Lyra. We are not alone, he said firmly. And she is not a servant. The captain laughed, raising his weapon. Lyra acted instantly, using a combination of agility and clever maneuvers to disable him. Ethan assisted, taking advantage of the opening she created. Within moments, the rogue captain was subdued, and the warship systems were under their control. Ethan stared at Lyra, awe and admiration written across his face. I couldn't have done this without you. Lyra smiled faintly. You would have failed without me, but we did it together. The council praised their success, but more importantly, Ethan and Lyra had proven something to themselves. Their partnership was unbreakable. They had faced overwhelming odds and survived because they trusted each other completely. As they returned to the station, Ethan felt a deep sense of respect and something more, a growing warmth he could not explain. Lyra, too, seemed to notice subtle changes in him, the way he paused to listen to her, the small smiles he gave, and the quiet reliance he now placed on her judgment. One evening, after the mission debrief, Ethan and Lyra sat together in the quiet of their quarters. The station was bustling outside, but inside it was calm. You know, Ethan said quietly, I used to think this marriage was punishment, humiliation, a lesson in shame. Lyra raised an eyebrow. And now, I think it's something else. Something valuable. You've taught me so much, Lyra. Not just about survival, but about trust, partnership, even courage. Lyra smiled faintly. I'm glad you finally realize it. You're learning fast, Ethan. He laughed softly. Yes, slowly, but I'm learning. For the first time, Ethan felt a true connection with someone who had once been only a punishment. He realized that Lyra was no longer just the low-class servant sold for $5. She was his equal, his partner, and perhaps even more. And Lyra, for her part, noticed a change in Ethan. He was more attentive, more careful, more willing to listen and act without ego. She had seen many humans, some arrogant, some weak, but he was different now. Together they had become a team that could face anything the galaxy threw at them. The council could try to separate them, the traitors could gossip, and the universe could throw dangers their way. But Ethan and Lyra had discovered a truth stronger than all that. They were stronger together than apart, and nothing, not even fear, prejudice, or punishment, could break their bond. As they watched the stars stretch endlessly beyond the viewport, Ethan placed a hand near Lyra's, hesitant but deliberate. She did not pull away. She looked at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes, and for the first time, Ethan felt a quiet certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. And perhaps in the vast emptiness of space they had found something rare and precious. Not just survival, but a true partnership, and the beginnings of something more. The galaxy might have tried to punish them, separate them, or humiliate them. But Ethan and Lyra had outsmarted fate, danger, and even prejudice. Together they had become something no one expected, and no one could ignore. The space station buzzed with activity, but Ethan and Lyra moved through it with quiet confidence. Their last mission had been a success beyond expectations. Not only had they saved the colony from the rogue warship, but they had also proven, to the council, the traitors, and everyone else that their partnership was more than a punishment. It was a force to be reckoned with. Yet, despite their accomplishments, whispers still followed them. Traitors muttered in corners. Council members frowned in private meetings, and a few curious aliens stared openly. Some believed that a human paired with a low-class alien servant could never last. Others, quietly, began to take notice of how capable and synchronized they were. Ethan, for the first time, felt no anger at the judgment. Lyra had taught him to ignore the noise of others, to focus on what truly mattered: survival, trust, and the bond they shared. You hear them again? Lyra asked, walking beside him toward their quarters. Ethan shook his head with a small smile. Let them talk. We know the truth. That's all that matters. Lyra grinned faintly. Finally, some sense from you. It's about time. The council had summoned them for a special ceremony, a formal acknowledgement of their achievements. Ethan felt uneasy, not because of the ceremony itself, but because he was unsure how to handle the attention. Lyra, however, moved with calm confidence, as though she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. When they arrived, the council leader rose to speak. Ethan and Lyra have shown courage, intelligence, and teamwork beyond expectations. Their efforts have saved countless lives and demonstrated the power of cooperation between species. We recognize their service and honor them today. Applause filled the chamber. Ethan glanced at Lyra, who gave him a small nod. She had stood beside him through danger, taught him lessons he would never forget, and now publicly they were being recognized together. As the ceremony ended, Ethan felt a sense of pride he had never experienced before. He had survived the punishment, learned humility, and discovered a partnership that went beyond duty, and he had done it with Lyra. After the ceremony, they returned to their quarters. The station had quieted down, and for the first time in weeks they were alone together. Ethan watched Lyra as she cleaned a small tool she had used during their mission. He realized how much he admired her strength, intelligence, and unwavering determination. "You know," Ethan said softly, "I never imagined this, not just the missions, but us. I thought I'd hate it. Hate you. Hate everything about this marriage." Lyra looked up, raising an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now, I don't know what I'd do without you," he admitted. "You've taught me more than anyone else, not just about survival, but about trust, courage, and even life." Lyra's eyes softened. "It seems your lesson is finally complete. You've learned humility, teamwork, and respect. Perhaps even something more." Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had not expected her to say that, yet somehow it felt natural. He had spent weeks fighting the idea of liking her, of respecting her. Now he could not deny it. He cared for her, more than he had ever cared for anyone. I think I do," he said quietly, almost a whisper. Lyra smiled faintly, a rare and gentle expression. "Good. That makes two of us." Their days began to change. No longer just forced partners, they became companions in every sense. Together they trained recruits in survival and strategy, taught other humans and aliens how to cooperate, and took on missions that required cunning and courage. Their reputation grew, not just as a skilled team, but as a symbol of what could happen when differences were set aside for trust and respect. Ethan found himself laughing more, speaking more freely, and relying on Lyra without hesitation. And Lyra, in turn, noticed his growth, his patience, his thoughtfulness, and the quiet admiration that now shone in his eyes. One afternoon, they were called to assist with a damaged trade convoy. Pirates had attacked a cargo ship, leaving it stranded in a dangerous asteroid belt. Without hesitation, Ethan and Lyra took control, guiding the convoy to safety with precision and courage. The humans and aliens they rescued looked at them with awe. "You make a good team," one alien said, its voice filled with surprise. Ethan glanced at Lyra, smiling. "We're more than a team," he said softly. Lyra smirked. "Careful, human. Don't get sentimental just yet." He laughed, but inside, he felt something new. Belonging, partnership, and the first real stirrings of love. Weeks later, the station held a celebration in their honor. Decorations filled the main hall, and beings from multiple species came to recognize their achievements. Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, watching the crowd. For the first time, Ethan did not feel shame, embarrassment, or fear of judgment. "No," Ethan said quietly. "I never expected this. Not the missions, not the respect, not even us." Lyra looked at him, her green eyes calm and knowing. "Life has a way of surprising humans," she said. "And sometimes the best things come from the worst situations." Ethan nodded. He thought back to the day he had been forced to marry her, humiliated and angry. He remembered every struggle, every mission, every moment they had shared. And he realized something important. Every trial had brought them closer, taught them to rely on each other, and led them to this moment. He took a deep breath, feeling courage swell in his chest. "Lyra, I don't want this to be just partnership or survival anymore. I want more. I want us together. Always." Lyra's eyes softened, and a rare, genuine smile spread across her face. "I've waited a long time to hear you say that, Ethan. And yes, always." Ethan's heart soared. For the first time, he felt a happiness deeper than he had ever imagined. The punishment, the hardship, the humiliation, they had all led him here, to love, respect, and a bond stronger than anything the Council or Galaxy could test. From that day forward, Ethan and Lyra were inseparable. They continued their missions, taught others, and explored the galaxy together. Yet now, every adventure was filled not just with danger but with trust, laughter, and the joy of being together. Traitors who once whispered behind their backs now approached with respect. Aliens and humans alike marveled at their teamwork. And for Ethan and Lyra, the greatest reward was simple. They had each other. One quiet evening, aboard a peaceful transport ship, Ethan looked out at the stars. Lyra sat beside him, her hand brushing against his. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, full of unknown dangers and adventures. But neither feared it. Together, they were unstoppable. "You know," Ethan said softly, "I never imagined my punishment would lead to this happiness." Lyra laughed quietly, resting her head on his shoulder. "Life works in strange ways, human. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best outcomes." Ethan smiled, feeling warmth fill his chest. He realized she was right. What had begun as punishment, as humiliation, had become the most extraordinary journey of his life. He had gained not just a partner, but a friend, a teacher, and someone he loved deeply. Together they would face the galaxy, unafraid, unstoppable, and happier than they had ever imagined. The stars shimmered outside the viewport, silent witnesses, to a partnership that had defied expectations, shattered prejudices, and blossomed into a love that neither had anticipated, but both now cherished above all else. And in that moment, Ethan knew that no matter what challenges came next, he and Lyra would face them together, side by side, as equals, as partners, as something far more precious than either could have imagined on that fateful day when punishment first brought them together. The galaxy had tested them. The universe had tried to humiliate them. But in the end, they had discovered something stronger than fear, stronger than prejudice, and stronger than punishment itself. A bond forged in survival, respect, and love.